Hello, welcome to the Business of Apps podcast. Today we have a special episode for you. We're featuring our recent webinar presented by Aampe, Agentic Infrastructure for Personalized Experiences. It brings together 4 mobile growth leaders to cut through the AI hype and share what's actually working, from app user acquisition to retention. The session goes beyond buzzwords to unpack the real unit economics of AI-driven testing, the challenges of letting go of control, and what companies like Blinkist are learning on the ground as they make the shift from automation to agentic systems. Without any further ado, let's go.
Hello, everyone. So 252 people. Awesome. Thanks a lot, everyone, for joining in today on this Wednesday. So today we are talking about, I think, maybe the hottest topic that there is right now in mobile growth. So how agentic AI is changing app growth from like the UA part, the acquisition part, down to retention part. And I'm pretty thankful that I'm not alone here. So I would be, I think, quite overwhelmed. But great people are with me here today. Yeah, just a minute or so to introduce yourselves for the few people who might not know you or your companies. Andy, maybe you go first with that.
Sure. I'm really happy to be here. I'm Andy Carvel, CEO, co-founder of Feature. We're a mobile growth consultancy, now part of Precis Group since February, so part of a bigger agency that Precis based out of Stockholm, Sweden, and sort of very big in the Nordics and Europe. We bring basically to that group deep expertise in mobile. My personal expertise goes back about 26 years in mobile. I'm far too old, been in mobile my whole career. Basically we're a full stack mobile growth agency. We work with some of the biggest brands in the industry, enterprise brands across like both consumer apps and games, and we help them with every aspect of growth, as well as sort of building kind of more integrated and cohesive growth engines.
Perfect. Matt, maybe going to you for the few people who might not know you or Blinkist. A quick
Sure.
intro.
So, hi everyone. I'm Matt Dyson from Blinkist. For those of you that don't know, Blinkist is kind of a micro-learning service focused around book summaries, both on app and web. We've been going like more than 12 years now, 40 million users, primarily English, but also supporting a few other languages. So our main markets are kind of US, Europe. And I've been at Blinkist almost 5 years now. My current role is VP Marketing, looking after kind of retention, helping on user acquisition topics, covering some CRO topics. Previously was a delivery hero and have about 15 years in this kind of digital online marketing space.
Insane. Ed from Amp, how about you?
Yes, hello. As you say, I'm Ed Brocklebank. I'm from Amp. We are a autonomous marketing platform, which we're going to talk more about agentic in the future, so I won't spoil it now. But my background is essentially in CRM and lifecycle marketing. I was at Bloomreach before this. At Amp, I'm currently head of solutions, so I'm talking to clients every day about how they're bringing agentic into their particular businesses. But I also sort of hybrid the role with product strategy as well. So I'm using kind of agentic systems internally to figure out what we need to build next at AMP as well. So looking forward to speaking to everyone today.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm Sven Jürgens in mobile growth now for over a decade, and these days building my own consultancy and helping publishers achieving their goals. Right. So. For everyone listening to that right now on their maybe mobile phone or browser, on the very right hand side of this one here, there you have like a chat where you can chat with other people, and the Q&A with specific questions that you might have, maybe for your company or yourself about AI, agentic workflows, and etc. etc. We will go through that at the very end of that. And also a poll that you can then use and answer these questions about AI. So then we'll also go through that at the very end. Okay, so we have a lot of stuff to cover. So let's just dive into that. when you scroll these days through LinkedIn or any newsletter, so I think AI and agentic systems is the one hot topic today. And when you look into app growth or anything related to mobile marketing, where would you say where actually the real value is, right? I mean, besides all the buzzwords, maybe from all the LinkedIn and all the hype, but the kind of real value when you use AI, Andy.
Okay, if we just want to like really cut to the core of it, like I think it's very existential actually for companies to understand how to embrace AI in growth, for two reasons, right? I think that privacy loss, and the sort of the changing sort of privacy landscape has made like user acquisition less effective, or certainly like sort of, it's not the competitive advantage that it used to be, right? The source of competitive advantage for an app company is changing, right? It's also not building product anymore, because you can also do that with AI very quickly.
Yeah.
So companies that are, relying on, those two things or some combination of them, right? They've got an existential threat with AI, right? So to put it in blunt terms, right? Then, more positively, what we see working really great for companies and where we see companies really like thriving with AI right now, it's like anything where it's like creating value for like testing, optimization, like fast test and learn cycles. The gain is not necessarily through like wonderful generative AI like assets, like visuals, like videos and creatives, although it can be that you get great assets out of it. But I think the real advantage is the changing unit economics and the scale of testing which is possible, which enables you to test a much broader landscape of possibilities and really find those wins, the sort of the needles in the haystack, which would have taken an almost infinite amount of time if you were running those tests manually.
Yeah. Matt, what do you think? Where right now, besides all the hype and the buzzwords, comes the real value from AI right now?
So even before we get into like the fully agentic part, I think I've seen it at Blinkist, like AI's really helped us uncover insights a lot faster. It's to a degree kind of democratized insights within the company. You can analyze user behavior, look at trends in the industry, look back at tests that you ran before, at a level of granularity and breadth that would have just been really resource intensive a year ago. Then using those insights, it helps us form quite good hypotheses for our tests, and it helps us refine those hypotheses. It helps us avoid bad tests with poor hypotheses that we would have probably carried out before. It helps us avoid adding variance to tests that probably would never win through things like synthetic user testing, and overall lets us prototype with a much lower effort than was possible ever before.
Nice. Ed, what is your take on that? So the real value from AI.
Yeah. I mean, two things. I agree with what Matt said, absolutely, and Andy. But for me, the two parts to it. One is prototyping. There's no longer the case where if you are talking to a customer and you're not a technical role and the customer gives you feedback, there's no reason now why you, as a customer success person or as a product manager, cannot mock up a solution or at least brainstorm what a solution might look like. So normally that would have to be done by a designer, and then it would have to be only made sort of static wireframes, and then that would go to engineering and get built. So I think that ability for anyone in the business to come up with ideas and test with customers on their own whether it's a good idea and customers respond before it even gets down the chain, and being able to do that super fast, I think companies that can nail that will be ahead. And we do that, like Aampe is 45 people, and I'd say 10, and I'm not talking engineering here, 10 people are actively building prototypes of features that could go into the product, and they're not technical. They're just listening to customers and coming up with that. But the other side is something we've been trying to solved for ages, which is personalized marketing. Everything now is rules based. It's like someone signs up, you put them into a segment. Are they a subscriber? Are they not a subscriber? If they're not a subscriber, send them this message. After 2 days, send them another message, and so on. And those have to be built by hand. But how do you know that's the right trigger? How do you know that's the right flow? How do you know that's the right message to send? Is it the right message? Everyone is so unique. If you've got 1 million users, why should everyone get that same flow? So for me, the exciting unlock here is how do you have a system that is coming up with those rules and not necessarily even having rules, just evaluating every single user that you have coming to your app and trying to deploy the best experience for that moment, for that person at any moment in time. That's where I think things are heading, and I'd love to get to, rather than these kind of more static, rules-based, segment-based marketing automation experiences that we have right now. Because as the others have said, if the value of code is going to zero and anyone can spin up apps very quickly, user experience is going to be, and sort of brand value and giving value to users is going to be the key thing. So whoever can do that, and personalized experiences is one of the ways to do that. Whoever can do that at scale, I think is going to be in a very good position.
Nice. So lots of stuff going on. So we hear experimentation, we hear speed, we hear also ideas, right? And Ed, you brought it up, and I think lots of people listening right now might not necessarily be from the engineering part, maybe marketing part. So you said that people also can be their own like prototypers, I would say. Maybe you can share something about that. So I think it's super interesting for the people out there. What kind of tools are they using at Aampe, or your colleagues, or what you hear out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed so much. Anything I'm going to say now will be out of date.
It will be outdated tomorrow anyways, but
yeah. So I mean, I use, like, if you look at my computer, I've got about 4 different agents running, but
yeah.
So internally, Figma Make is quite popular with our design team. For me personally, I really like Claude Desktop, although I'm now using Codex as well, so they can fact check each other's work because the latest models there are good. But if you're just starting out and you have no technical experience, something like Claude Desktop I think is really great. And if you're more of a designer, then Figma Make is also great as well. With those 2 alone, I think you can do some really cool stuff and share some really cool stuff without having to know anything technical. But like, if you're only using ChatGPT on the web or Claude on the web, you're missing out, because there's a lot of stuff that you can do on the desktop now. And if you're just using the web, sometimes the agents don't have all the context about your business, about your brand. So every single time you use it, you have to re-put all that information in. It's a complete drag. It's going to slow you down. So the way I personally work is I have a whole file system on my local computer with markdown files, and that has all the information about the project I'm working on. So every time I start a new session, the agent is just reading all that, so I don't have to give it any of that stuff to begin with.
Awesome. Nice. Great. So before the session, I was actually Googling when ChatGPT came out. So it was November 22. It felt quite longer because there's so much stuff going on, right? And AI was such a big hype and topic, and still is, right? But now it also feels that it's moving into agentic, right? So from AI, not only like typing into some web browser or something, but also having like agentic systems going on, right? I mean, Ed, you talked about that, and just ping this question out to you because you were there. So everyone, it feels that everyone is talking about agentic, right? And what do you think, for like a practical sense in marketing, what does it mean for people out there?
To me again, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's such a buzzword that really we need to just think about what it actually means. It's having agency, which effectively means it's able to make decisions and take actions, right? That's the only thing. So rather than a chatbot where you type in a question, it gives you back an answer, that is not agentic really, because it's not taking any action really apart from giving you the text back. Where it becomes agentic is when you provide it with tools, and that's the common phrase they use in AI. And a tool might be the ability to look at a file system, or the ability to connect to Google Drive, or the ability to connect to Slack. And so if the AI has the ability to connect to those and make decisions on what it wants to do with those things, then it becomes agentic. So there's so many unlocks. It could be internal operations. Like, is there a process that you're having to do every day? I saw one agency who they do like SEO audits and paid search audits, and you have to manually, you open up Google Ads and you pull down the report and you put it in CSV or Excel, and then you do the analysis and then you upload it into a dashboard. That is the kind of stuff that an agent is perfect for. So any sort of internal operations that you're having to do again and again every day, that is something you should really consider as to can you sort of make it better internally. But then, there's the more sort of advanced stuff where systems that you can't necessarily build yourself because they need to be able to scale. Like, as I said, doing full on marketing automation where your agents are deciding who to send to, what they should send, that kind of stuff, you're probably not going to be able to build as a non-technical person. So everything between those two is up for grabs, and it's really up to you as a business to decide where do you want to focus. Do you want to make it externally facing, or do you want to make it more about internal processes? And as long as you're sort of learning and figuring out ways to provide your business value and your customers value, I think you're onto a good thing.
Sounds like a plan. Matt, what about you? When you think about agentic and this whole discussion, I would say, about agentic systems and in a marketing related way. So what comes up for you?
I mean, I agree with Ed here. It's essentially about delegating some level of autonomy in decisioning to the agents, right? Like, I think in the simplest terms, when I think about kind of older school marketing automation, that needed to be really precise to function. Like, I remember the times where a wrong character in a creative or a file name, just like the whole thing fell over.
Yeah.
Now you don't have those problems anymore, or at least to a low extent, because the agents can be much more adaptive, right? They can understand that, okay, it's just one wrong character, and they can continue the process. But that's on the quite like simple scale of just running some kind of automation and being flexible in the way that it does it. I think then you have on the other end of the spectrum, where it's not just kind of adapting and interpreting, it's really acting and making decisions on what your users see. This might be, for this example, kind of in CRM with the likes of Aampe, on deciding what messages a user is sent, but it can apply in other places as well.
Nice, yeah. Andy, going to you. Agentic, big buzzword, I know. Maybe you can slice that down also from your experience at Feature. Agentic and marketing, how can you bring these together?
Yeah, sure. So, like, we've been kind of on a journey at Feature in terms of just how we're also sort of applying this stuff on behalf of our clients, but then also like figuring out what we can do in terms of like just what Ed was kind of describing, lots of things which you can sort of automate just in your own workflows internally in any company. And I think I would start there just by saying, I've seen some fantastic work going on at Feature with like the HR team, like building really cool software. Like it's just amazing to see like HR like building stuff, and like the finance team like building like their whole like set of dashboarding tools, which like normally would have been like, an expensive external project. And they're just building stuff to like scratch their own itch, right? So there's lots of stuff like that, I think, where every company can kind of deploy agentic AI to like great effect, right? But then there's some bigger things that we've tackled at Feature, where we've kind of been doing a lot of things on behalf of our clients. In some cases, running thousands and thousands of experiments manually, like App Store optimization would be one of these things, right? We're very well known in the industry for App Store optimization. That's one of the growth surfaces that we we operate on in the mobile sphere. So we literally wrote the book on App Store optimization, but like it's like, how do we kind of then evolve that, and can we build an agentic version? And that's exactly what we did with this tool that we created called Press Play, which is like a system which can, it's a closed loop agentic AI system, right? That it generates hypotheses based on based on like trying to understand like how to improve conversion in the app stores, right? So it's an automated app store experimentation engine that can run up to 300 parallel experiments in the store at any one given time, and it does. If you've got enough traffic, it will massively parallelize. That's just an insane amount of scale, compared to what any team could do manually internally. So it generates the hypothesis. It then creates assets which test that hypothesis. Then it deploys those assets to the store. It runs them as experiments in Google Play, and soon it's coming to iOS as well. It then looks at the results of those experiments. It sees whether it's a win or a loss, and either way, the closed loop system learns something, right? It's like it's learning from the losses as well as the wins.
Yeah.
A lot of them will be losses, or they'll be inconclusive, right? But then it can go around that loop very quickly. Particularly if you've got enough traffic, it can parallelize, to run 300 of different tests in parallel. It very quickly iterates to really in some cases very meaningful wins, double-digit conversion rate increases on App Store pages. And it's like, we're like, wow, okay, right, this is very powerful. I think that was a real aha moment for us internally. And we've got that live now. It's like being, folks like King, the games company, and Adobe, and RBI, the bank company, that they're using this extensively, across a lot of their, particularly on their tier 2, tier 3 markets. I think there was a, I think it was Ed you mentioned, or it might have been Matt. Sorry, I forget which of you mentioned this kind of concept of you need to be able to maybe trust the AI a little bit to make some of the decisions. If you're going to put an agentic AI in the loop and give it a bit of control, you need to be able to cede some control over to the human. So I think that's where we see some of the challenge at the moment is just how quickly companies are willing to make that jump to these kind of pretty interesting automated agentic loop solutions.
Yeah. I mean, you were tackling trust right now, and I think it's also interesting for the people listening right now, because I think lots of people will think about agentic solutions or AI solutions. And Andy, just talking about what you said, because I think it's super interesting that, for example, your finance team is building dashboards, and your own employees are kind of enabled to do something that was never be able to do before, right? But still, at least when I play around with these tools, there's still a lot of hallucination going on, right? And for example, let's say just your finance tool, they want to look at the right numbers, right? So is there still a human in the loop, or how do you make sure that is what you build or your people build there is still trustful?
Yeah, this is a really good point. And I wouldn't say that necessarily I have all the answers to that, right? Certainly when it comes to finance, yes, I would hope that we're not giving the auditors stuff that we've just literally spat out of ChatGPT. What they built actually was sort of more like a data visualization dashboarding solution. But of course, those dashboards could still have bugs in, right? They could still be showing the wrong graphs or whatever. So the question is valid. I think when considering this as an organization, sort of, you've got this kind of risk versus reward kind of balancing act, right? Which for every organization is going to be a bit different. Depends on, external parties and sort of supervision and stuff. If you're in a highly regulated industry, your tolerance for risk is going to be lower than if you're, I don't know, maybe making mobile games, right? But even in mobile games, you might have some really expensive IP that you've licensed, in which case, you can't mess around with Sonic, right? If you've licensed Sonic the Hedgehog, you've got to make sure you've got IP holders that you can satisfy. So I think in every situation there's always this risk reward kind of assessment, and I think that's, as I said, I think it's very individual, but it's for us back to your question, I think when it's internal stuff where we're sort of working on our internal workflows, it's kind of, we don't put an awful lot of extra safety checking around this stuff. We see the value of the productivity gains and just the new capabilities that it brings us to empower the whole company to be using AI. to be way higher than than the risk of, I don't know, the finance team getting a graph that doesn't quite look right, or that some hallucination like sneaking into a report or something. But it's a non-zero risk. You're right.
Yeah. I mean, I also see that with clients, right? So a lot of people are going into VO3 from Google, right? Content creation, video creation. I think there it's sometimes even beneficial to be a bit more funny. Sometimes when you look back like 2 years ago, the 7-finger hands, right? So sometimes that was kind of interesting and click worthy at some point, right? But I think I'm with you. It's an assessment, right? I think finance teams would want to double check when they hand them over to, I don't know, PricewaterhouseCoopers or someone. And I think for more marketing related stuff or video generation, sometimes you even get away with that, right? And it sometimes might be funny or whatever, right? For everyone listening to that, still want to point you onto the Q&A. So if you have any questions for your company, for yourself, or whatever, so on the very right-hand side here of this program, you can type in your questions or use the chat or also use the poll. So whatever is on your mind right now, especially when you have like very specific questions, right, in the Q&A, then you can type that in, and then later on we will go through that. So, I mean, we also talked about the path right now from, I think ChatGPT was opening that space as the first ones from AI. Then we also talked about automation. So for me personally, it feels like the last maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years was more or less automation focused, and might be that the next 10 years might be agentic focused, right? So that is maybe the future of that. Maybe next 20 years, who knows, right? Matt, when you play around with that, or also use or moving from automations to agentic systems, what do you think your team or maybe whole Blinkist is thinking about that process, and maybe what is getting harder for your teams then?
Yeah, sure. I can speak to that, but maybe before I do, just to slightly build on the point from Andy in the previous question around like, how do you ensure this stuff kind of works? And I think that across these topics, there's a ton of parallels to like how humans work. And what we used to do is have like 4 eyes principle on a lot of things. And you can apply the same thing to AI, where you just get 2 AIs to check each other, right? So I think there's a lot of parallels that you can make there on like, okay, well, if I have a higher risk appetite, how do I kind of offset that a little bit? And you can offset that both with a human in the loop, but also with another AI in the loop. Then on this,
it's interesting, I think, also for many people out there. So maybe you can share that, maybe not, but is there like a specific tool that you use for double checking then?
No, not a specific tool, but it's rather using a different LLM. It's if I come to a conclusion or an output from one LLM, first of all, challenging it with maybe a second agent within that same workflow, or challenging it with a different agent from a different LLM. I think leaving those things kind of unchecked is you open yourself up for a bit more risk. But if you have that internal system of checking, you can really spot a lot of things before they go out.
Yeah, makes sense. And just to reiterate the question from before. So Blink is a big company, right? And I think also these days moving from maybe purely automations then to agentic systems. So what do you saw within Blinkist or within your team maybe that made it harder along the way?
So I think there's 2 hard parts to this. I mean, there's probably lots, but there's 2 that come to mind. The first is assembling the right knowledge base for those agents, right? If you think of those agents like humans, that you're now delegating autonomy to, they need to understand. They need to understand the context. They need to have the right data, the right information. You're asking them to make decisions. They need to be prepared with the right information to make those decisions. So having a good knowledge base that they can work off is kind of the fundament at the start. And the next piece, which I think is quite challenging, is deciding the autonomy that you're going to allow. And this is kind of a tension between giving not enough and bringing in too much of your kind of old rule-based world rules and guardrails in. And if you do that, then I think you just limit a lot of the upside, because you're not giving it the agents much playroom. But on the flip side of that, if you give them zero guidance and you allow complete autonomy, then you can get a lot of noise, or you just have a long time of learning while they do a lot of experimentation. So I think those are the two things that we work on a lot, is building that knowledge base and then deciding that level of autonomy that we want to give and the level of guidance that we want to give.
Do we have it's interesting, do you have like a rule of thumb for the people out there? Because I think a lot of people will struggle with that. Maybe they did, or they will next year. Freedom, guardrails, some rule of thumb?
I think in some topics we've allowed too much freedom. So I think I think this also depends on how many users you have and how quickly you can allow that thing to experiment its way into optimization. But I think you can give it a little bit of a shortcut by taking some of the things that you validated before and trying to set those up as guardrails. So I don't think it's zero guidance. I think if you're adding a lot of rules, then you're really going to limit the impact. I mean, Andy spoke about the press play, and I've seen some of the images that came from those tests, right? And those weren't things that maybe a designer that would have done. So if you'd have put perfect brand guidelines in, then they might have never have existed. But if you gave zero guidelines, then Sonic might be pink, right?
Makes sense. Andy, since you were mentioned, when you see like the kind of shift, I would say, from automations to agentic systems, maybe it feature or the clients you consult, what are struggles?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think, Matt touched on some really good points there. I think, and coming back to, this concept of trust and like how much kind of trust, if that's the right word, how much control, I think is how Matt put it, like how much control do you cede to the machine, right, to the agent, and how much supervision and control do you want to have over that, in that checking process, right? And certainly with press play, right? Yeah, we've seen that when you allow an agentic closed loop system to really explore a large option space, with a learning loop in it, right? It gets to some really great results. And as Matt said, like that, some of those results are not the things which a design team would come up with, right? We're talking about sort of icon designs and things like this, right? Now, I think, that definitely there may be situations where you just, the icon is sacred, right? We work with companies where they want to approve every single test, very, very precisely. Like, so there's like a manual approval step that we built into press play, right? Which is where, you can run it on full auto, or you can have somebody come in and say, yes, I approve this one. I approve this one. No, that one's not going live. That one's not going live, right? So you can have this like human filter. But I do think and I'm curious to know if Ed would agree with me on this, but I think that at some point, like, we need to cede more control, considerably more control to the machine in order for it to really do its job well. And I think that when often, like, what that gets to, right, if you sort of take it to extremes, you're often optimizing for actually relatively small audiences, because you're able to kind of subdivide a large audience into like very many like individual clusters. At which point, like, then the risk of like putting out a wrong asset or a wrong message, right, to a user is relatively low. But like the learning of the whole system of like figuring out, like, getting better at clustering and getting better at the right messaging should be like way like more valuable overall, right? So I guess my point is, I think if I can be a bit controversial, maybe I'd say I think it's very arrogant to assume that a person knows best, right? And I think that that's often, that's not to say that a brand team or a legal team shouldn't have some oversight over like what an AI is doing, right? But if we're talking about performance and we have clear performance goals, right? And we set a complex agentic AI system that's well built and well tested, like towards optimizing towards a goal, and you give it enough data and enough leeway, I think we're seeing that it can get to some really, really fantastic results. And I think the more that you try to put too much oversight in between the machine and the goal, you're just really slowing down those cycles and you're leaving impact on the table. And I think that's part of this existential threat that I see, where there's going to be companies that really move ahead at a really light speed because they're able to lean into this and adopt it, and others who are going to, for whatever reason, not feel comfortable with letting the AI like do its work. And I think we'll get a widening gap between the two of those.
Yeah. Ed, I would like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And I think I'd like to make the distinction that not all AI is generative AI. I know when we say AI, most people go to LLMs and generating content, but that's not necessarily the case. For example, let's say you have 10 recommendation engines and you don't know which is the best one. None of those are generative. They're just models that your data science team has built. But an agent could be trying to decide which is the best for which person. So the agent isn't kind of coming up with any content. It's just picking one of the recommendation engines. Now, it might get the wrong one, for sure, but that's not disastrous to your business. It's not really going to harm your brand if it shows the wrong recommendation to one person. So you can test things simply. We're not saying go out and generate emails from scratch for all your 10 million users, although I think that is a possibility in the future. So yeah, you can put in guardrails by making sure that not everything is fully generated by an LLM. That said, when you're trying to do agentic marketing and you're going for every message has to be somewhat personalized, and by that, so just the way AMP works is, maybe you have a push message and you break it down into a header and a body, and the body may have 3 components, right? So that's 4 components in each. And you may have 10 variants for each of those components. So that's 10 times 10 times 10 times 10 combinations. That's either 10,000 or 100,000. My maths fails me right now, right? But it's a lot of variants, and you can't possibly go through every single one of those combinations and check it's accurate. But what you can check is that each component makes sense. So the 10 you've written for component A, the 10 you've written for component B, C, and D. So that's only 40 things you have to check. So you've got some sort of guardrails that way. Now, where it becomes complicated, and what often happens with us, is that say the CEO of the company, you've told your CEO, hey, we're running this with agentic marketing. And the CEO comes to you one day and goes, why did I get this push message? Right? Now, you've got to figure out why the agent sent them a push message rather than email, why it sent it to them at 2 a.m., why it used that particular combination of things. And that's a hard thing to answer. So the observability of what agents are doing, when you want to figure that out, that becomes difficult. Because then you have to really sift through the data and figure out why. And that's very different to the old school way of doing things, which is essentially you create broad segments of people. And if someone got a push message, there was only 2 variants of it. And you could pretty much figure out, oh, they were a new user, non-subscriber, they must be in this segment. Here's the workflow that triggered it. This is why you got that message. When everyone is getting different timings, different channels, different content, the observability is a lot harder. So as Andy says, you've then got to let go a little bit of the control. It will make mistakes, yeah. Just like support agents on websites make mistakes, but on the whole, a lot of companies have adopted them because they're kind of the cost, the benefit outweighs the cost. Generally, people are okay getting responses from an online chatbot. Consumers aren't, but companies, it's not really going to say anything too negative. Maybe there's the odd occasion it gets posted on X and everyone goes wild, but generally it's okay. People have accepted that. So yeah, there's a cost benefit analysis that you have to do as a company to figure out if you're okay with giving up some control, accepting that you may always not know fully why it did the thing it did. But as long as you're getting the results, that's the thing you have to focus on. The other problem we see is that if you've got an agentic system running your marketing, it's very difficult to do attribution well, because the agent is looking at everything. And so the old school way of doing it, how much money did that push make me? How many subscribers did that push make me within 7 days? That becomes the wrong question to ask, because the agent isn't optimizing for that campaign. It's optimizing for the user as a whole across all campaigns, and maybe not sending that campaign to someone at that moment was the correct decision. So you may actually, we've seen examples where one campaign that was doing really well for an app, actually it started sending less, and they were like, this is terrible, we need to turn it off, get it back up. But it was because the agent had a sort of longer term vision, and it was seeing patterns that you couldn't see if you were looking short term. So yeah, completely agree. Observability goes down, control goes down, and I think it's only quite forward-thinking companies that are okay with that, like Blinkist, who are willing to do that, because it is a leap of faith, right? And it does require a new way of thinking, and I don't think everyone is ready to adopt that. Maybe in a year or two things would have changed, but right now, there are definitely cons to it. But if you get it right, there's a lot of pros.
Nice. Matt, we will go to you in a second, but Ed, since you talked about that, I'm just curious. So, I mean, lots of stuff you said is about control, also letting go of control a bit. I mean, there's a bias built in, right? Customers going to you are open to that, I think. But do you think, also for the people listening right now and might consider using some sort of AI or agentic systems, etc., is that the main blocker, like being open-minded and say, cool, I let go of control in the end, right?
I think it is a big blocker. I think everyone gets the concept that agents are pretty smart, and it makes sense to get your agent running your marketing, but it's the practicalities of, are they okay with that happening? So often internal politics gets in the way. They then worry about, well, what does my team do now? There's a lot of stuff you have to do, like create content for the agents to send out, right? So your kind of job role shifts a little bit, and I'm sure Matt can attest to that. So yeah, that's probably the biggest blocker we see. People are so set in this mindset because they've been doing it for the last 15 years of, I build a segment, I build some rules, I build a couple of variants, and I optimize one workflow, and then I build another workflow for acquisition, and then I build another workflow for retention, or a couple of workflows retention. To then go, actually, don't build any of those rules or segments necessarily. Just build like 100 push messages, 100 emails. Start thinking like a 1960s marketer. If you've seen Mad Men, right? It's all about going back to traditional roots of marketing. What is the value that you are selling? Like, why does someone sign up for your app? Is it because they're looking for something of value? Is it because they want simplicity? Is it because they want to sound educated? Is it because, what are the different reasons someone's signing up for your app? And then go away and create content for all of those value propositions for all of your segments.
Yeah.
And if you spend a lot of time on that, that's where the real shift happens. That's what your team ends up doing, because you don't have to create all the rules and segments. You let the agent figure out of this catalog of 1,000 messages which one is perfect to send at any one moment in time. So yeah, you're kind of shifting from the rules to this building this library of content, and that's more of a traditional way of marketing, that the art of which has kind of been lost, like good copywriting. Again, everyone's like, well, just get AI to do that. Maybe, but that's sort of really understanding your business and what is driving people to sign up and use your app. And how do you communicate that to someone in a way that is very effective, knowing that not everyone is signing up for your app for the same reason? If you're selling clothes, is it because someone's got a party this weekend? Is it because they've got a new job and they want to look smart for an interview? These are the kind of things, if you can create content for all of those, which you don't have time to do right now because you're so busy building the rules, and you can get an agent to figure out which of those messages to send. Again, this comes back to what I was saying earlier. If someone is receiving those kind of messages, they trust your brand more because you're like, hey, this guy knows me. It's the equivalent of going into a shop every day, and the staff are able to ask you the questions and understand what you're after, and that's kind of what you want the agent to do. But if you don't have the content ready for the agent to pick from, it can only send a couple of messages, and you're never going to get to that point.
Yeah, makes sense. Matt, going to you. You are, or Blinkist actually is a customer at Aampe right now, and maybe you can take us by the hand. Maybe also, broadening the space here for the listeners. What that brought to you? How do you now think differently? Also, your team maybe, and maybe you also went through the struggle of what we talked earlier of letting go and losing control at some point. So just take us by the hand and walk us through that process working with Aampe.
Sure. So in that process, like talking about like new skills or new things that the team needs to do, right? If you're delegating a lot of decisioning to the agents, which you do in Aampe, of like what to send to who, this segmentation part, you have to put in a lot of time and thought into what they're learning from. Coming back to this kind of knowledge base before in Aampe, this is like the raw events that you're going to feed it, right? Because that's how that machine learns, is by the events that your users are doing. And it needs to have a high quality and high volume of events. So you have to start there. And I think that's more important than ever when you're delegating those decisions versus kind of in a rules-based system when maybe I only need the events to do this one linear user journey. But in Aampe, I need the events to consider all possible kind of user journeys. And then on the other side, you need to understand what is the subset of those events that I want to reward the agents with, and to which kind of weight to drive the actions that I know are valuable to my business, right? So I want to reward those agents getting people to paywalls and subscribing. I want them to, in our case, be consuming content. At some point, I want them to be deeper in the product in our kind of feature set so they become stickier. Yeah. So that has actually a lot of parallels to how performance marketing works as well, which maybe if we get time we can speak about later. But I think those two skill sets, and then the content perspective. I mean, in a rules-based system, you're kind of limited by, you have to pick, I think for this user at this point, this piece of content is best. So you create one piece of content. But in Aampe, I can give it however many pieces of content, and then the agent decides for user X, this piece of content is better, but for user Y, this other one is better. So kind of content creation at scale to give it the variety it needs, I think is also important. And then like, I can only kind of paraphrase the challenges that I think Ed spoke about in terms of managing a system that is no longer as comprehensible as a rules-based system, right? So essentially what you're running with your communications is thousands of experiments at the same time, and trying to understand why a user received a certain thing when that experiment is like tailored to that individual user is really difficult. So in Aampe, those agents are doing kind of multi-dimensional learning on the metadata of a message. So it's trying to understand, was it the time that was important? Was it the tone of the message? Was it the contents of the message? Are other users like this doing certain actions? So this, to know why a certain user got an email at 1 a.m. with this content is explainable. And that's like that trade-off between giving away some control and trying to orchestrate some things yourself.
Yeah. Do you think I mean, like I said before, I think there's a kind of bias for open-minded companies and people also using new solutions. But maybe you can talk about that a bit also for your team or for Blinkist as a whole. Was that hard, like the shift to actually let go, right? Because people like control, right? Everyone likes control at some point.
Yes, because you can't really explain what's going on.
Yeah.
Right? So yeah, it's hard, but also the alternative isn't easy, right? If you want to drive more performance in a rule-based system, you end up with what I kind of term kind of this like branching setup of tests and microsegments that also is not so simple to explain at some point.
Yeah.
So it's not so the alternative is also not perfect.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome. Yeah, I think we also got some questions from the audience, and I think Ed was quite busy typing already. So thanks a lot for that. I see one here that is calling Matt, actually. So I think we can just jump into that. So you see that on the right-hand side. And so that was marked already. So Matt, you mentioned you're using, I just read it for everyone, right? You mentioned you're using AI across experimentation and maybe deployment too. You're using agentic AI integrations between platforms for decision making, execution analysis, and redeploying experiments. Or are you using AI more for strategic thinking with human execution? Would love to understand. Katie.
Yeah, so I think a great example of this is kind of what we're trying to build in our like CRO function. We have, I'm forgetting the number of agents now, but sub agents doing each kind of component. One's researching, one's building hypotheses, one's prioritizing hypotheses, another is helping us analyze tests. So there's still a manual part where we're deploying the tests at the moment, but all of the pre-work before a test goes live and all of the analysis once it's live, those are individual agents that are helping us with those individual tasks. And some of those are responsive to when we're inputting data. Other of those are automatic in surfacing the insights or the information that we need.
Nice. So we've got a few more incoming. Let me just scroll through that. So there's one from Hannah. So I'm just reading for everyone. So when you're talking about rewarding agents, are you referring to using reinforcement learning? So
I'll let Andy take that one because I know. Yes, AMP uses some reinforcement learning. I know Andy also has experience with that, so maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so reinforcement learning is this kind of concept where you kind of really give a model a goal, and then sort of you basically let it figure out through a lot of trial and error to start with, like how to get there, and it builds like over time a very usually very performant way of actually achieving that goal in a variety of situations. And the example that I just posted there in the chat is a tool that we built, and we're actually also licensing like separately. It's called Catchbase, and it's a reinforcement learning bidding engine for, in this case, Apple ads. Right? You could apply this to other ad networks as well, but we learned a lot also about how to build reinforcement learning systems from building this, and so scratching our own itch. Again, that's pretty much all we do. It's like there's something that we've been doing manually for a long time. Like we look at applying a lot of like how we've figured our process of doing it manually, and then like see if we can apply bring an agent or a reinforcement learning model to it to do something a little bit better or more efficiently. And in the case of Catchbase, we train each model individually for each client based on their app, and also like several million simulated app store movements. So we have a lot of like kind of real app store data, and then we can simulate like other app store changes, basically like rankings going up and down, bidding changes, and so it's basically going through a very accelerated learning process rather than just turning it straight loose on the client's app and have it figure it out bid at a time, like how to actually improve the bidding. We run it through a simulated test environment, which is very, very efficient. Then we turn it loose on the client's app, and they typically find it gets about 30% increase in ROAS over a more traditional like rules-based automation, which is what's typically prevalent.
Yeah. Andy, there's another question. Ed was already answering that, but I would love to funnel that to you because you also talked about that and was touching that. I'm just reading for everyone out there. So how do you determine the threshold for when you are like internal only trial and error testing to, now it's moving away here, to client-side deployment?
So I would answer that from features perspective. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the threshold is when this comes back, I think, to your question a little bit also, Sven, about sort of how do you make sure that it's not making errors, right? Like, so I think the threshold for us is like when we've been deploying it, typically with a couple of like early clients, right? So we try to work with like real client situations rather than just purely simulated, kind of internal examples. So we try to find customers who are like willing to be more adventurous and have a high tolerance for risk and error that will help us refine that. We did that with Press Play with Wildlife Studios. They were fantastic. They were like, wow, this looks really cool. It was very, very early, but they really helped us to refine that product like live in the Play Store. Because some companies are willing to take that risk in order to get that first mover advantage, right? And we got some great performance for them, but we also probably, for sure had a lot of bugs, in the software. We probably deployed some dodgy looking assets to the store. And so, we need to find those customers who are going to be okay with that and are excited to try something brand new. But we try to get it live into production as quickly as possible and get it get some real world data to answer the question.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more from the audience. I think, Matt, that is going to you because Blinkist is mentioning here. So just reading out loud for everyone out there. So what are the changes required in data layer for implementing any learnings from Blinkist, assuming agentic AI fails loudly when the data layer is shaky?
Yeah, so generally how we were doing this is we were giving a lot of, pretty much all of our Snowflake events to AMP. And we do some transformation of those to make sure that they roughly make sense before we loaded them to AMP. And then kind of as we've been building it up, we've realized that some of our events maybe are too low volume to be used as a decent reward function. And then we've had to respond to that and say, okay, well, I want to use this kind of user behavior as heavily weighted in reward, but it's quite low volume at the moment. And then we have to think of solutions for that. So I think that touches on the question of, bad data in will ultimately to like bad outputs out. We will need to transform some stuff, but I think you can learn as you set up the system.
Nice. So I think we can talk about that forever, and we are just scratching the surface here. So we have 2 minutes more. So everyone, maybe a few sentences for all the people listening right now. 262 right now. When they want to move maybe from automations to AI or from automations or AI to agentic this year, what is your recommendation? What should the people do out there? Ed, going with you.
Well, I'm biased, right?
Tiny bit.
Come and talk to me. Like, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll show you software. But so I would do that. Aside from that, like I get a lot of my AI knowledge from Google. I have an Android, whatever. But if you swipe right, you can get the news feed, right? All I do is I click on a lot of the AI articles. So after about a day, Google's AI has learned that I'm into that. And so every day, because it's such a fast moving pace, I always want to keep on track of it. So that gives me a lot of information. But I'd highly recommend you just get familiar with it yourself, download a couple of the tools and play around. Because and start experimenting, failing and seeing what works. I think you need to do that. Maybe play with it internally. But yeah, as I said, if you want to have this externally facing and a more robust, bigger system, and not just for sort of optimizing your internal processes, then yeah, come and chat.
Nice. Matt, what do you think for the people out there?
I think create a knowledge base for the problem that you're trying to solve. Like, imagine that a new joiner that has never worked on this topic before, collate all the information that they would ever need, and then start to think of what AI or what agentic system could use that to actually deploy some change for your users, and then think how you're going to reward it. That's where I would start.
Nice. Andy, quick one. So last minute going on. Your takeaway for the people here.
Yeah, scratch your own itch, I'd say is my recommendation. Start with something that you know and you know how to do manually and you're used to doing it. And then see if you can get, download Claude Code or any of these tools and see if you can automate even one little part of your workflow. And I think once you do that, you'll catch the bug.
Nice. Yeah, thank you so much. So it's 6 o'clock here in Europe. Thank you so much, Ed, Matt, and Andy. Great talking to you. And the people out there, if you have any questions, I think you are all open on LinkedIn. Your DMs are open. And if any questions arise, just reach out to the people here. And thank you so much for joining, and see you next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
And that was the episode 265. How Agentic AI is changing app growth from acquisition to retention. Hosted by Sven Jorgens, mobile growth consultant. Featuring Andy Carvel, partner and co-founder at Feature, Matt Dyson, VP Marketing at Blinkist, and Ed Brockleback, Head of Solutions, Aampe. To listen to more episodes, by now we have more than 250 to check out. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube podcasts. Just search for Business of Apps and you will find us easily. Remember, we release episodes on Mondays, so subscribe and you'll be able to get new episodes on your smartphone, tablet, or computer as soon as we release them. And please don't forget to leave us a review or comment on iTunes. It is highly appreciated. And all episodes will also be available on businessofapps.com. Thank you for listening. See you next week.